Sniper Carlos Hathcock and his spotter, John Roland Burke, were exhausted from scouting the Vietnamese jungle for their next target in the humid and scorching heat. Hathcock was yet unfazed. Through his binoculars, the seasoned shooter silently examined his target. The Cobra, a fearsome counter-sniper who had turned into his enemy during the conflict with the North Vietnamese. Hathcock, however, was certain that Cobra was no superior to him. After all, the valiant soldier was facing the largest bounty ever paid to an American sniper in Vietnam, $30,000. After the initial effort failed, Cobra and Hathcock played cat and mouse deep in the jungle until they could see each other. After they pointed their weapons at one another, the subsequent events solidified the infamous White Feather sniper's status as a Marine Corps icon. Carlos Hathcock participated in 2 trips to Vietnam. At one point, his commanding officer was forced to confine the 5'10", 120-pound sharpshooter to his quarters because he volunteered for so many risky missions and never took a day off. Hathcock mostly utilized an 8-power unertl scope on a Winchester Model 70.30-06 caliber rifle. However, he occasionally also employed an M2 Browning machine gun. For 35 years, he held the record for the longest confirmed sniper dispatch at 2,500 yards, which he achieved with his Winchester rifle. The adversary began calling the sniper Du Kích Long Trang, or the White Feather Sniper, as his fame among the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army increased. The white feather that Hathcock wore on a band in his bush hat was the source of the nickname. So many people were killed by the notorious sniper that he eventually had a bounty placed on his head. Hathcock's head was worth $30,000, although the awards the People's Army of Vietnam offered American snipers usually varied from $8,000 to $2,000. Several Marines in the vicinity chose to put the characteristic white feather on their hats when an enemy sniper platoon was dispatched to hunt down the white feather, misleading the North Vietnamese and making the task of the counter-shooters even more difficult. Nevertheless, Hathcock shot and destroyed every shooter who attempted to capture him, setting a new record for the biggest bounty. Mostly out of need to support his family, Carlos Norman Hathcock taught himself to shoot and hunt at a young age. During his early childhood and adolescence, Hathcock and his dog would travel far into the Arkansas wilderness, where he would pretend to be a soldier and use a .22 caliber J.C. Higgins single-shot rifle that his father had brought back from World War II to hunt fictitious Japanese soldiers. Hathcock's childhood desire of joining the U.S. Marines was realized in 1959 when he joined the service at the age of 17. The young Marine had won numerous shooting contests and awards by 1965, including the Wimbledon Cup, the most coveted long-range shooting honor. A year later, Hathcock landed in Vietnam and began his first assignment as a military police officer, implementing military rules and regulations while safeguarding troops and assets on Army installations. But Hathcock quickly enlisted for battle because he desired adventures. Carlos was personally handpicked by Captain Edward James Land, who encouraged the Marines to prepare snipers in every unit after learning of his sharpshooting records. The Arkansas native subsequently became a sniper. After that, Hathcock was moved to the 1st Marine Division Sniper Platoon, which was based at Hill 55, 10 miles southwest of Da Nang. There, he would go on to become the most deadly sniper of the Vietnam War and a Marine Corps legend. Other notorious snipers lurked in the Vietnam woods besides Hathcock. Additionally, the Marines dubbed a female shooter, interrogator, and reputed platoon leader on the Viet Cong's side Apache, who was well known for her brutal tactics in the Vietnamese woods long before Hathcock showed up. Apache, who was renowned for her leadership and sniping abilities as well as her tendency to torture American GIs, was described as both attractive and deadly in a number of stories. To make sure the other American commanders could hear the excruciating screams, she reportedly frequently positioned herself and her victims close to U.S. Army facilities. Apache's preferred weapon was a 7.62mm Model 44 Russian-made Mosin Nagant rifle with a sight, and she and her crew operated in the vicinity of Hill 55, Hathcock's base. After killing one of his closest allies in November 1966, Hathcock looked all over the enormous terrain for the sniper, but he kept coming back every night without finding anything. According to legend, late one afternoon, Captain Edward James Land saw 5 Viet Cong armed guerrillas with a small-framed Vietnamese woman who was holding a firearm that matched Apache's description. Hathcock and Land threaded cautiously and waited for the ideal moment to fire as the American pair got closer to the group. Land finally ordered an artillery bombardment on the Vietnamese snipers as the woman knelt down to relieve herself. As they were being fired, the gang began to move towards them after realizing they were being ambushed, and Captain Land gave the order for Hathcock to take her down. Hathcock reportedly used his Winchester sniper rifle to swiftly attack Apache, and when she collapsed to the ground, he fired one more shot at her just for good measure. The men then looked at one another in shock, and after a few seconds the silence was broken by cries and laughing. The most deadly lady in Vietnam had just been killed. Another North Vietnamese known as the Cobra, a fearsome counter-sniper who wielded a potent Mosin Nagant 9130 rifle with a scope, was always pursuing Carlos Hathcock. Outside of Hathcock's private living quarters, the dreaded shooter captured a gunnery sergeant and numerous other Marines as part of his particular mission to kill Hathcock. When Hathcock discovered his fallen buddy on the ground, he subsequently recalled, quote, "I made a pledge right then and there. Somehow I was going to get him." Cobra's skill was acknowledged by the American, and it was just a question of time until one defeated the other. He was certain though that he was not superior to his adversary, no matter how excellent he was. One day after leaving base with their equipment, Hathcock and his spotter John Roland Burke started to follow the enemy sniper through the Vietnamese jungle close to their firebase. Cobra silently aimed at the American sniper as he saw Hathcock and his group. The shot, however, missed and struck Burke's canteen when Hathcock unintentionally tripped over a tree. The two competing marksmen and their spotters wound up on opposite sides of where they had begun when Cobra failed the shot and fled deep into the jungle. Sadly, the North Vietnamese were now facing the sun, and the sniper's sight reflected a glint of light. As soon as Hathcock saw the gleam in the bushes, he grabbed his weapon and shot his adversary. Then, when he got closer to his target, he was startled to discover that his bullet had passed past Cobra's sight and struck the counter-sniper squarely between the eyes. Then Hathcock grabbed the counter-sniper's gun, intending to bring it home as a prize. But in the end, the weapon was taken from the armory of the facility. In 1967, senior U.S. officials opted to release the sharpshooter, believing Hathcock was burned out by his many risky missions. But after just 1 week of being at home with his wife and child, he re-enlisted. With no further training, the Patriot was a Marine at heart and wanted to keep defending his nation and fellow Marines. After that, Hathcock was moved to Quantico, Virginia to train rifles, but he wasn't pleased there and was later ordered back to Vietnam to head a sniper platoon. He and his unit were riding LV-T-5 amphibious armored fighting vehicles when they were hit by an anti-tank mine on Highway 1, north of landing zone Baldy, on September 16, 1969. The car instantly exploded in flames. Unaware of his own wounds, Hathcock continued to endure the flames while pulling 7 Marines from the burning vehicle and then collapsed in a rice paddy, determined to save as many lives as possible. Then, a number of other Marines rescued him and submerged him in water. After that, Hathcock and the 7 Marines he had managed to free from the car were flown to the USS Repose, a hospital ship. After that, they were sent to a naval hospital in Japan before arriving at Brooke Army Medical Center's burn center in Texas. His career as a sharpshooter ended as a result of the incident, as he had burns to 43% of his body, some of which were 3rd degree. Hathcock's valiant actions in the amphibious tractor mishap earned him a Silver Star and a Purple Heart while he was recovering. That same year, the Marines made another unsuccessful attempt to retire him. Despite limping and starting to experience mobility problems, the still young 27-year-old was passionate about fighting. As a result, the senior leadership chose to commission him as a gunnery sergeant aboard the USS Simon Lake submarine tender in Spain. In 1975, however, a new commander was shocked to discover that Hathcock was no longer able to move on his own. After that, the sniper was taken to the hospital, where his physicians made the sobering discovery that he had multiple sclerosis. Following the devastating news, Carlos Hathcock returned to Quantico's Marine Base, where he assisted in the establishment of the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School and gave police departments and a few military groups, including SEAL Team 6, sniper training. Hathcock was constantly in pain due to his numerous wounds and his progressive illness, yet he devoted his life to training a new generation of snipers. But as his health worsened, the renowned sniper passed out in 1979 while instructing a session. The cherished instructor had to retire because he had lost his mobility and was only 55 days away from his 20th anniversary of enrollment. The U.S. Marine Corps still holds Carlos Hathcock in high regard, and in fact the Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock Award is named after him. This award is given out every year and was created to, quote, Recognize an individual who has made significant contributions in operational employment and tactics of small arms weapons systems which have impacted the readiness and capabilities of the U.S. military or law enforcement. In an interview, Hathcock would claim that his ability to enter a state of complete, utter and absolute focus with his equipment and surroundings, where every leaf and breeze had a purpose, was the only reason he was able to survive as a sniper. Hathcock ultimately achieved nearly 100 verified deadly hits on North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers. Nevertheless, during the battle, a third party, someone other than the sniper's spotter, had to verify such acts. Confirmations were difficult because these third parties weren't always there, particularly when the target was behind enemy lines, which was frequently the case in Vietnam. According to Hathcock, the real number fluctuated between 300 and 400 enemy soldiers throughout the conflict. Even though he was unquestionably effective, the sniper consistently claimed that he didn't relish the carnage and that his primary concern while embarking on a mission was keeping as many Americans safe as possible.